do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last.
This is not a routine confirmation hearing. This is a masterclass in evasion until a combat veteran senator traps a nominee with his own written words. Senator Tammy Duckworth, who lost both legs in combat, faced Pete Hegseth over women in combat roles. The exchange that follows exposes a critical disconnect. But first, the moment that defines this hearing.
Mr. Hegseth, let's continue on this line of questioning about what's sometimes referred to as women in combat. I think that phrase is something of a misnomer. Many members of this committee have served in combat in the last 25 years, to include women and men. I'm sure all those men served with women, whether they were military police officers or they were pilots or whether they were intelligence analysts or medics or what have you. You served. I assume you served with women who were on the front lines as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were those women anything other than skilled, brave, and honorable in their service?
Right out of the gate, Hegseth admits he served with women on the front lines. He calls them some of the best soldiers he worked with. The entire foundation is now laid. He cannot claim he doesn't know what women bring to the military. But watch closely. The moment the conversation shifts from generic praise to specific policy, the goalposts immediately move. Duckworth asks about the Trump administration's plans, and Hegseth's answer pivots from lived experience to abstract concerns about standards. This is classic confirmation hearing survival mode. Concede nothing, repeat talking points, imply things without ever stating them.
They were some of the best soldiers I worked with.
So women have been serving in combat for a long time. Women have even been serving in combat units like infantry battalions for a long time in roles like medics or mechanics or what have you. So what we're talking about here specifically is women in ground combat roles in jobs like infantrymen or artillerymen or special forces. Now, until about 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Under Secretary Panetta, those roles were opened up to women to serve in. Has President Trump indicated at all that he plans to rescind or alter that guidance?
You're correct to point out, Senator, that these are the decisions that the Commander-in-Chief will have the prerogative to make. He has not indicated to me that he has plans to change whether or not women would have access to these roles. However, I would point out, ensuring that standards are equal and high is of importance to him and great importance to me. Because in those ground combat roles, what is true is that the weight of the ruck on your back doesn't change. The weight of the 155 round that you have to carry doesn't change. The weight of the 240 Bravo machine gun you might have to carry doesn't change. And so whether it's a man or a woman, they have to meet the same high standards. And Senator, in any place where those things have been eroded or in courses, criteria have been changed in order to meet quotas, racial quotas or gender quotas, that is putting a focus on something other than readiness, standards, meritocracy, and lethality. So that's the kind of review I'm talking about, not whether.
Notice the rhetorical move here. The question was simple. Will President Trump change the policy on women in ground combat roles? The answer, stripped of all the political filler, is a simple he hasn't indicated that to me. But Hegseth immediately follows it with a dark and ominous suggestion that somewhere, deep within the Pentagon, standards are being systematically eroded for racial and gender quotas. He offers absolutely no evidence whatsoever, no specific course, no unit, no timeline. Just the vague insinuation of a DEI boogeyman infecting the ranks. Classic deflection. This is a deliberate conflation of two separate issues: the existence of women in combat roles and the integrity of the standards for those roles. Senator Duckworth, a soldier who re-enlisted after losing her limbs in combat, is not about to let that slide. And she won't.
To ground combat.
Okay, so thank you. So you expect no change to that guidance, but as you point out, in these specific jobs, there are irreducible physical demands. We expect our intelligence analysts and our mechanics to be physically fit in the military, but it's different when you're in the infantry or the artillery. You just mentioned a few things. Let me point it out. An artillery shell weighs almost 100 pounds. An Abrams tank round weighs around 50 pounds. The M240 Bravo machine gun with its tripod weighs almost 50 pounds. The average weight of a full kit, ammo, water, commo, body armor for a soldier is over 100 pounds. Nothing you can do can change any of those things, right? That is physical reality.
Go ahead. Yes, Senator. And I would say the requirements to handle those things in a ground combat unit, as far as standards, can look different than those of a medic or a drone pilot. And so it's not that it has to be the same standard throughout, it's standards to maximize efficacy of that.
Senator Duckworth does not simply object here. She actively dismantles. She acknowledges the irreducible physical demands one by one. The 100-pound artillery shell, the 50-pound machine gun, the total weight of a combat kit. She frames the argument on a factual foundation that Hegseth himself just explicitly endorsed. He has no choice but to agree. This creates a clean and very powerful trap for the nominee. If Hegseth argues that women cannot meet these standards, he must explain why the system fails. If he argues they can, his insinuation about eroded standards collapses entirely. He tries to split the difference, claiming the review is about meritocracy and not access. But then Duckworth plays her hidden card. She reads a direct quote from an Army officer that perfectly mirrors Hegseth's position and waits for him to endorse it. He does, wholeheartedly and enthusiastically. This is a classic case of leading the witness into his own political noose.
That particular position.
Let me read a quote here from one Army officer. While it may be difficult for a 120-pound woman to lift or drag 250 pounds, the Army cannot artificially absolve women of that responsibility. It may still exist on the battlefield. The entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held, regardless of gender. The intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. I assume, based on your testimony, you agree with that Army officer?
Absolutely. The standards need to be the same and they need to be high. And they need to be set by the people closest to the problem set, closest to the understanding of what is required by that job. Commanders, commanding officers, and COCOMs and elsewhere who understand the reality of what they face, that's the feedback we should get. That's what should be enshrined and enforced, and no other set of political prerogatives. When I talk about removing politics, ideological or political prerogatives should contribute to those determinations. Nothing other than the execution of the mission.
Thank you. For the record, that Army officer was Captain Kristen Greist, the Army's first female infantry officer and one of its first female Ranger School graduates. One final point, you said they need to be objective, gender neutral, and high. That's because the demands are, in fact, very high. The current physical fitness test for the Army has a minimum 2-mile run of 22 miles. Run. And I want the reporter to note that I'm putting run in air quotes, because 22 miles at 2 miles is not running. It may be jogging, it's probably walking fast.
And then comes the full and devastating reveal. The officer whose own words Hegseth just endorsed so enthusiastically was Captain Kristen Greist, the very first female infantry officer in U.S. Army history and one of the first female Ranger School graduates. Hegseth just wholeheartedly endorsed the very standard his political base fears the policy change is meant to undermine. This is the fundamental difference between a generic political attack and a substantive policy debate. Captain Greist's quote is crystal clear. Gender-neutral tests exist to acknowledge the objective physical reality of the job. The intent is explicitly not to ensure an equal likelihood of meeting the standards. This is exactly what Hegseth claims he wants. If a Democratic nominee had ever suggested that women were degrading military standards without evidence, they would face public execution in the committee room. For Hegseth, the committee simply nods and moves on with the hearing. This is a blatant double standard that perfectly encapsulates his entire approach to leading the Pentagon.
Let's move on. We've got a big 22 minutes. We've got a big audience here. Many of them seem to be patriotic supporters of you, Mr. Hegseth. Some of them seem to be liberal critics of you. I would note that it's only the liberal critics that have disrupted this hearing. As was my custom during the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great ally.
Thank you. Because another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last.
And Senator Duckworth is far from done with this specific line of questioning. She brilliantly turns the criticism of standards back onto the institution itself. She points out that the Army's physical fitness test allows a 22-minute, 2-mile run for the absolute minimum standard. 22 minutes for just 2 miles. She literally puts the word run in air quotes in the official committee record. She says it may be jogging. She says it is probably walking fast. So who exactly is eroding the standards here? If Pete Hegseth is so genuinely concerned about the Pentagon succumbing to political correctness, why is he completely and utterly silent on the low baseline standards that already exist across the service for everyone? The answer is painfully obvious. The standards crisis is a selectively applied political weapon. It only matters when it involves a demographic the base does not want in the club. When it is an institutional rot that allows any soldier of any gender to simply cruise through, it suddenly is not a priority. But the hearing is about to take a bizarre turn, shifting from the technical ground of military readiness to the far murkier ground of foreign policy and political theology.
Member of Hamas.
And the third protester said something about 20 years of genocide. I assume that's our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think our troops are committing genocide in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Senator, I do not. I think our troops, as you know, as so many in this committee know, did the best they could with what they have. The outcomes, and tragically, the outcome we saw in Afghanistan under the Biden administration put a stain on that, but it doesn't put a stain on what those men and women did in uniform, as you know full well.
Pete Hegseth walked into his confirmation hearing and did 3 specific things. First, he tried to create a crisis of standards that he could not actually prove existed, only to be immediately dismantled by a combat veteran who revealed the very standard he just endorsed was written by the first female infantry officer in American history. Second, when pressed on the most consequential foreign policy question of the moment, he endorsed without any qualification whatsoever the destruction of every last member of an entire enemy force, a statement that ties American policy to an open-ended and brutal military campaign. Third, when confronted with the very real legacy of America's own 2-decade-long wars, he retreated to comfortable partisan grievance instead of offering a single substantive legal defense of the troops. This is not a rigorous interrogation of a potential Pentagon chief. This is a flashing red warning sign. Hegseth's entire approach, dodge the hard question, blame the other side, embrace the most extreme posture available, is a clear roadmap for a Defense Department consumed entirely by politics at the very moment the world demands sober, nonpartisan leadership. We cannot stay silent. What happens when the most powerful military in history is guided not by steady strategy, but by daily political grievance? Share this video with someone who needs to see the stakes. Watch the full exchange for yourself and make up your own mind. The stakes for the Pentagon and for the nation could simply not be set any higher.